Welcome to Washington. I'm Britt Hume. George W. Bush may be ahead, but the presidential race has been tight for weeks, and there are few signs that will change in the days ahead. With that in mind, Vice President Gore has set his sights firmly on the battleground states of the Midwest, where he must contend not only with a strong showing from Mr. Bush, but with Ralph Nader as well. Fox News correspondent Jim Angle reports.
Before he was completely awake, Gore was on the banks of Lake Michigan talking about the environment in an effort to blunt Ralph Nader's appeal and, of course, continuing his attack on Governor Bush.
Both sides in this election have proposed targeted tax cuts. Here's the difference. My plan targets its benefits to the middle class. Governor Bush's plan targets its benefits to the wealthiest of the wealthy.
In recent days, Gore's attack on Bush leaves no stone unturned. He charges Bush would destroy Social Security, undermine Medicare, turn a blind eye to sick children and seniors in nursing homes, and protect the interests of what Gore identifies as corporate villains. But voters don't seem to be buying it, as Bush still holds a narrow lead in the polls. In an interview with Fox, Gore was asked why.
I think there is still a large group of undecided voters who are waiting and looking very carefully. Some of them waiting until now to really focus on the issues.
Polls show the number of undecided are down to about 8%, but Gore argues their failure to tune in is why he isn't doing better. It certainly isn't for lack of trying. With only a few days left, the words are getting sharper, as Senator Lieberman demonstrated in Green Bay, Wisconsin.
George Bush is not ready to be president of the United States.
But Gore himself is reluctant to make such a charge.
I don't express that view because I don't think I'm objective on the question.
But do you want your campaign to say he's not ready to be president?
I respect Senator Lieberman's right to say what he wishes.
And with little more than a week to go before the election, the kiss is back. In East Lansing Sunday, near the Michigan State University campus, Gore acted like a college kid, kissing Tipper repeatedly. Later in the day, though, in Muskegon, where the audience was largely families, Gore saw a sign asking about the kiss and tried once again, but was rebuffed.
Are you embarrassed?
I did notice that at speech here in Muskegon that you did turn him down on another kiss.
I ration them.
Now, Gore this week will be making what the campaign calls the closing argument to voters. So far, they've thrown everything but the kitchen sink at Bush, and they're still hoping some of it will stick. Brett?
The latest on whether they're going to throw Bill Clinton at Bush and where.
Gore told us last night, Brett, that he will not be campaigning with Clinton. That's because he wants to be his own man. He said it doesn't have anything to do with pollsters, which is not quite true. The campaign has been doing heavy research, polls and focus groups. They found that in a lot of places with swing voters, people are still mad at Clinton over the Lewinsky affair, and they don't want to bring him in anywhere where he's likely to anger voters that they need to win key states. Britt?
All right, Jim, thank you very much. State polls, as you know, suggest the presidential race is far too close to call in many of those traditional battleground states. But George W. Bush has decided to pass them up for the moment for a venture into places where no Republican has won anything since 1988. Fox News' Carl Cameron reports.
George W. Bush launched into the last lap of the White House race with a repeated charge that Al Gore cannot unite the nation and therefore cannot lead.
My opponent cannot bring America together because he will not confront the hard issues, and by his delay, he makes them harder. My opponent cannot bring America together because his big government ideas are out of touch with our time and out of step with the American people. My opponent cannot bring America together because he practices the politics of division.
It was a sweeping condemnation of Gore's politics and policies.
He places the burdens of Social Security reform on our children. He does not reform Medicare. He leaves children in schools without hope or change. Our military is declining before our eyes, and he pretends that all is well. His vision of reform is to build a better bureaucrat, not to empower people to make their own decisions.
On each of the 8 remaining days, Bush plans to highlight a different issue.
From the inertia of our education bureaucracy to the third rail of Social Security, I won't take the easy way, the Washington way. I will act, and I will lead.
Bush began his final push with his signature issue of education reform, noting that the federal education department has failed 2 audits recently and cannot account for $700 million.
They don't know where it was sent. They can't say where it went. They only know it was somehow spent. And I believe Mr. Gore owes the American people an explanation.
Bush tries to use humor to attack Gore's character and credibility. The new line for the stretch run combines a rap on Gore as a big spending liberal, too.
He proposes over 280 new or expanded federal programs, but claims they won't involve one more bureaucrat. You know what I think? I think he might be exaggerating.
And Bush is now in California, where he'll make an appearance on the Jay Leno show and campaign in California, the state with the most electoral college votes to be had. As for all the attacks on Governor Bush from Gore and the Gore campaign, he calls them political scare tactics, and today all but called them out-and-out lies, saying, quote, his campaign attacks are designed to spread falsehood and cynicism. Brett?
So, Carl, I mean, he must be pretty confident to be out there when, for example, Florida looks to be very much still in play. Same is true in the upper Midwest. What's going on? What's the thinking?
They say they're very confident in states like Wisconsin and Florida because of Jeb Bush, his brother, the governor of Florida, obviously. In California, he's going to campaign 3 congressional districts, the 3 hardest-fought battles for the Republicans, including one held by impeachment manager Jim Rogan. So there is a dual effort here, both to win for George Bush, but to help the Republicans in the state. Brett?
All right, Carl, thank you very much. We'll have a little more on California later this broadcast. Meanwhile, nationwide tracking polls show that George W. Bush is still leading Vice President Gore and that the race is still very close. The Voter.com battleground poll puts Mr. Bush ahead 43 to 40%. However, that's within the polls, 3% margin of error. The Rasmussen Portrait of America poll shows Mr. Bush leading by 47 to 41% over Vice President Gore. The CNN USA Today Gallup poll, whose numbers have been all over the place, puts the number now at 47% for Mr. Bush, 44% for Mr. Gore. And Zogby Reuters MSNBC poll has Mr. Bush ahead 45 to 42%. That also within that survey's margin of error. We'll have more on the surveys later with pollster Scott Rasmussen. And coming up next, though, how will a new development in the Missouri race affect Democrats' efforts to gain control of the Senate? And we'll take a look at that after this. A cornerstone of Democratic hopes of winning the White House and a tougher place for Republicans. George W. Bush is trying to change that with the hopes of Republicans on the ballot with him in that state in the balance. William Lajeunesse reports on the Golden State.
Of the 19 states considered close races, California is by far the biggest surprise and biggest prize with 54 electoral votes.
In this election, anything is up for grabs.
No one thought Governor Bush had a chance here, a state where Democrats outnumber Republicans by 1 million voters. The LA Times puts Vice President Gore up by just 7 points, down from 14. The San Francisco Examiner puts the margin at 10, while a third poll puts it at just 5 points. An uphill battle for Republicans, but a race they're not willing to concede.
Bush is charismatic. He's got the character, and he's a winner.
Republicans have $70 million to get out the vote, 3 times more than in 1996. The state party's kicking in $1.5 million, and the Bush campaign will spend $5 million alone on advertising, appealing to swing voters by campaigning with Senator John McCain and Latinos on Spanish-language television.
I think he's making Gore work for California. I don't think he's going to win California, but he's going to make him work for it, and also to take him away from the states that he really needs to be in.
The Democrats will counter with their big gun, President Clinton, called here by Governor Gray Davis. Clinton will campaign on behalf of the party, hoping to unseat 4 vulnerable Republican representatives, a key to the Democrats regaining control of the House.
There may be a lot of folks saying that they're going to vote for Gore, but guess what? Many of them are not going to show up because there's no passion there.
There is passion for wild card candidate Ralph Nader, with 5% in the polls in California and Washington, 8% in Oregon, where analysts say he could give Bush a victory in the traditionally Democratic Pacific Northwest. Since taking office, Vice President Gore has visited California 50 times, campaigning and raising money. Governor Bush just 11 since announcing his candidacy last year. While California is not considered a toss-up, it is a state Democrats cannot take for granted. In Los Angeles, William Lajeunesse, Fox News.
Many analysts agree that any hope the Democrats may have of gaining control of the Senate this season hinges on winning Missouri. That won't be easy since the already tight race was thrown into flux by this month's tragic death of the Democratic candidate, Governor Mel Carnahan. The development. Fox News correspondent Rita Cosby reports on the Senate, beginning with the Missouri race.
With Republicans defending a slender 8-seat majority in the Senate, the announcement by the widow of the late Democratic Missouri Governor Mel Carnahan could spell bad news for the GOP.
Should the people of Missouri elect my husband, I pledge to take their common dreams to the United States Senate.
If Mrs. Carnahan's deceased husband wins on the ballot, Missouri's Democratic acting governor says he'll appoint her to fill the Senate spot, a move that's expected to draw a court challenge from incumbent Republican John Ashcroft. Meantime, in Virginia, another fierce race is underway. Senator Chuck Robb, one of the Democrats' most vulnerable incumbents, is now pulling even with conservative former Governor George Allen after a barrage of television advertising.
This race is in a phase where both candidates know that they're fighting for their political lives.
34 of the 100 Senate seats are up for grabs this election, with the tightest dozen or so races scattered across the country. In Florida, Republican Congressman Bill McCollum, a House manager during President Clinton's impeachment trial, is trailing behind Democratic State Insurance Commissioner Bill Nelson by as many as 10 points in some polls. In Washington State, Republican incumbent Slade Gorton is trying to hold off software millionaire and former Democratic Congresswoman Maria Cantwell, who's closing the gap to within a few points in the latest polls. In Michigan, first-term Republican Senator Spencer Abrams' once double-digit lead over Democratic Congresswoman Debbie Stabenow has faded, with the two now in a statistical dead heat. And in the Northeast, New Jersey Democrat and millionaire John Corzine has seen his early lead shrink. Republican Bob Franks is now within striking distance. And the much-publicized New York Senate race has First Lady Hillary Rodham Clinton locked in a tight race against Republican Congressman Rick Lazio. The polls here are all over the place, some showing Clinton 8 points ahead, others show them statistically tied.
You simply have more seats in play than you very often have in an election. I mean, you know, they just pop up like firecrackers.
Despite the drama, most believe Republicans will lose 1 to 3 seats overall in the Senate. That's enough to keep them in control of the upper chamber, but only by a slim margin. In Washington, Rita Cosby, Fox News.
Don't go away, everybody. We'll discuss the latest polls with the pollster Scott Rasmussen right after this break.